We're here with the guest segment of our show. We are talking to Andrew Demeter. He is a youth activist. He runs the YouTube channel Teen Take. He's interviewed Ben Swan. He's been featured on InfoWars, and he made a documentary about GMOs that was entered into a C-SPAN contest. We'll find out how well it does here on Wednesday. But I really liked seeing people like this out there in the liberty movement, because this kid's 16 years old, like this, and he's been invited to a TED Talk, and it's just really encouraging to see people like this, because the mantra that's out there from the mainstream is that, oh, well, what can one person do? Well, you know what? We're going to find out just what one person can do, and even at a very young age. So I'm really happy to talk to you.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So I want to give you the floor, because I know you had mentioned that you're helping in the process of writing a bill, right?
Yeah, it was actually rejected to my knowledge recently, so it hasn't really gone too far. But yeah, I was slightly involved. My friend Kevin, he's a follower of Teen Take and around my age too, and he lives in Florida, and he recently went to Tallahassee, the state capital, and presented this youth in government bill. It was number 2091, and that was supposed to ideally introduce GMO labeling, but unfortunately that was rejected. But there are still other state bills currently on the floor being debated. So there is promise out there, but unfortunately the one that I was involved with was shot down.
So make the case against GMOs and why they need to be labeled.
Well, pretty much, this was Ben Swan's argument when I interviewed him for this documentary. He said, I'm a believer in the free market, and I hold this stance as well, not just echoing or parroting Ben Swan, but he said, I'm a believer in the free market, and I don't think that there should be restrictions, but since we already have nutrition labels that list out the calories, the ingredients, etc., it's really common sense to know if there's scientific material that's been genetically altered in our food, and there's been various contradicting cases and studies on GMOs, but ultimately, as Monsanto, or not necessarily Monsanto, but people say, there's GMOs are good, there's nothing different between conventional and organic products. Well, if that's the case, why not label them? If you're so happy about this scientific technology that can, in theory, feed the world and fortify our diets, then why not put that on a label and be proud of that? So that's pretty much my case against GMOs.
Yeah, and you had said that you're not for any kind of restriction. So I guess you're referencing like some of the sect of the libertarian movement that says, oh well, why are we going to use the force of government to force labeling on these products? And I feel that philosophically that might be true, but we're not there yet. And I feel that because they're genetically modified and the crops are subsidized, I think that in theory, if we're going to have governments and we're going to have this whole setup that we have now, that because they're subsidized using our own money, that should give us a say as to if they are labeled or how they're used and applied.
Exactly. It's really saddening to see the way that the consumer is being misrepresented. But even more, going back to the notion of the free market, it is really promising that there are these grassroots, if you will, companies rising up who are voluntarily labeling their products as non-GMO. Some of the companies being Annie's, Amy's, etc., some of the products that I buy. And that is really promising because it's now easier to find a product that has the non-GMO label or organic label instead of a product that says this contains GM material. And we've even now seen big corporations like General Mills, who produces Cheerios, I believe, they're now saying that they're going to nix all types of genetically modified ingredients in Cheerios. But keep in mind, this is kind of a double-edged sword at times, because even with the USDA organic label, when I interviewed a biotechnologist from the USDA, who I ended up unfortunately scrapping for various reasons from the documentary, she said that in the USDA organic label, there can actually be a 5% margin of GMO products or ingredients in those type of products that have those labels. So it's absolutely ludicrous. Again, the consumer is just simply being misrepresented, and we really don't have informed consent as to what we're consuming on a daily basis.
Did she give you a reason for that kind of overlap in the lenience of having 5%? Because from what I understand, that once you plant a GMO crop, because we most of us know about the patent that was placed on GMOs, making it illegal to grow it if you haven't signed up with Monsanto to grow it, and then Monsanto shows up next door, the seeds fly into your yard, you grow it, you get sued, you lose all of your own plants in the process. And I know in areas like Canada and stuff like that, it's so viral, like you can't really stop GMOs from crossing. So do you think maybe that has something to do with it, or are they just kind of covering their own ass because they don't want to comply, or what reason did she give for that?
Well, she was actually more in the public policy sector of genetically modified foods, so she didn't really give a specific reason. And mind you, she had this pretty much pre-written script of answers because I had to send the questions beforehand. So she was pretty much periodically looking down throughout the course of the interview, reading off these answers that her boss probably gave her. But yeah, there are definitely people rising up, and Mother Nature, as one of the doctors that I interviewed in the documentary, Dr. Sarah Stein, she said Mother Nature will find a way to transport these genetically modified seeds and these Monsanto patents. And even in New York, a group of organic farmers preemptively sued Monsanto, saying that, well, we should have the right to sue you preemptively because your seeds can go via wind currents into our farms, and if that happens, that doesn't mean that we're trying to illegally plant your patented seed. It simply means that Mother Nature is circumventing the system. And that case was actually shot down and denied. And the judges in that case said, well, you really have no reason to say this, or Monsanto said that. So it's just absolutely ludicrous that Monsanto is patenting Mother Nature and biological processes.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize a lot of the implications that comes with that, because it's not just, oh, well, they have a patent on this seed. Because of what you said, like wind blowing the seeds over and the restrictions that come with that. I mean, you literally, if that happens and you have a GMO crop in your field, and they find it and take you to court, you literally lose your own yields.
Yeah, and complete farmers' lives who have been affected by these implications, their lives and their business are completely ruined. In a documentary I watched called Food Inc. on Netflix, it really chronicles these farmers who have been affected. And in the United States specifically, like I said, farmers completely lose all their money, all their business. And even in foreign countries, there are farmers who are awesome because they burn these genetically modified crops, like in Hungary. But also, what else was I going to say? I'm not sure. I'll come back to it if I remember it.
That's all right. Well, you know what? We're kind of we're talking about solutions and labeling and things like that, but let's take a step back and say, why is this stuff necessary? Because it's growing, and you know what? I agree with you with the free market. I think we see that all the time in the rise and expansion of farmers markets, and the health section, the quote unquote health sections in stores growing and stuff like that. It's definitely a growing trend, and that's the free market at work. But let's go over why this action needs to be taken against GMOs to begin with, because really all the FDA is useless. The FDA is saying that everything's fine. Of course, the former head of Monsanto is the head of the FDA now, but why? What has your research turned up to suggest that we need to take action against GMOs to begin with?
Well, whether or not GMO foods or products have potentially toxic or deadly health effects is kind of almost an irrelevant question. People, regardless of these possible health effects, they should at least be knowing what's inside their food. And unfortunately, people don't. They simply, well, at least the majority of people go into a grocery store, pick whatever product they see, and with all this deception in the media, which is another way that this information is processed, in the media, there are all these big corporations advertising their products with various techniques of propaganda. So children are attracted to these products that are all colorful and everything. But ultimately, it's really a war on information. We need to wake the public up. And we've seen this with some grassroots movements called Label It Yourself, where these people, and it's very controversial, of course, but they go into these grocery stores with their own GMO labels saying there's genetically modified ingredients within this product, and they slap that sticker on the product in the store. So it's really, again, just a war on information, and then the health effects kind of come second, in my opinion. But again, people should be knowing what they're consuming. I mean, a long time ago, there were farms and people created their own food and grew their own food. But now, with agriculture being so heavily subsidized by government, we see this complete monopolization, and the consumer is really just losing power.
Yeah, and that to me is the scariest implication of the entire thing, because we have basically handed the power of the entire food supply over to Monsanto by allowing this monopolization to take place. And you know, you get a lot of we talk about a lot of things on this show. You see a lot of problems with the economy. One, I think another reason why people buy these they are economically incentivized to buy it, because as we see the further destruction of our economy by overregulation, overtaxation, inflation, the whole nine, people are basically forced to buy these foods, and then we wonder why we see rampant increases in diabetes and all these negative health effects in the poorer segments of our society. But what I think is really, really scary is that governments that have become tyrannical in the past, such as communist Mao, have used control of food as a weapon to starve out their own populations. And we now see that because we have, as we said, the monopolization of the food supply in Monsanto. It's a revolving door with government in the leadership, and now they're patenting it against us.
Absolutely. It's now easier to buy a bottle of Diet Coke than it is to buy an organic apple. It's absolutely insane. And even when I was interviewing the USDA lady, as I referred to earlier, she was saying, as far as the revolving door is concerned, that she was like, because we all know Michael Taylor and Clarence Thomas are involved. Actually, Michael Taylor specifically. Clarence Thomas apparently didn't make this final decision in the Supreme Court case involving Monsanto. But she said, when I asked her about the revolving door, she said, well, you know, there's this 5-year time lapse between when somebody can work for the FDA, or the USDA rather, and work at one of the companies that's being regulated. So pretty much the people who are supposed to be regulated, or the corporations rather, are the ones who are in fact regulating their own products, and it's absolutely insane. And also I was going to mention something else, and I can't remember.
That's, I mean, yeah, as if 5 years later, if I, worked my way up, spent my whole life or whatever, working my way up through Monsanto, as if 5 years later, I'm going to forget all that. That's just, obviously one of the loopholes that they do. But I think the health issue is what really turns a lot of people on to the topic once they find out the truth of what kind of health effects you have. Because on the opposition, the other side of it is people are trying to say, oh, well, this could create a world without hunger. We could totally change Africa. We could totally change the world with GMOs, and yet still those conditions never seem to change over there. And meanwhile, we know the truth of what's going on health-wise with it. So get into some of what your research has turned on at the health implications of these products.
Yeah, I'll do that in 1 second. Going back now, I remember the point I was going to make the other day in some article about the White House garden. Keep in mind it's organic. Go figure, with Michelle Obama trying to stomp on obesity across the nation and everything. But anyways, I was reading this article, and when the White House chef or some White House advisor was asked about the organic garden, he said, well, of course it's organic. There's kids who come by often and play in the garden and plant and plant seeds or whatever. So why on earth would we have pesticides and toxic chemicals there? And that was just insane to me. It's like, so this organic garden, if it's in the White House and, kids are playing in it, they shouldn't be involved in touching chemicals. But if it's in the government subsidized, monopolized food supply, then, it's not only okay to touch, we can, in fact, eat it and consume it and have it stay in our bodies for whatever prolonged duration of time. But going back to what you said about the health effects, I interviewed one doctor specifically, as I mentioned before. Her name was Sarah Stein, and she said that GMOs there's a correlation, possibly not causation, between GMO consumption and obesity. She also mentioned a lot of different things relating to gut disorders. We've seen now gluten intolerances, we've seen various types of cancer, infertility, etc. And there's actually a gene, I believe, in genetically modified corn called epicite, and that has been proven, I believe, to cause infertility and sterilization or sterility. So it's absolutely insane when you really investigate these issues and just see what turns up.
Well, you just inspired me. You just gave me an idea of a call to action, and I want to put it out there for everyone. What we need to do is we need to get some GMO seeds and throw them into the White House garden. I want to see that lawsuit happen. I want to see the United States versus Monsanto because of that.
That's actually a really good idea. And of course there's no other surrounding farms, unfortunately, that could contaminate that garden. But yeah, I'm sure Obama would be sued by Monsanto. Absolutely crazy.
So I've seen the whole topic of GMOs can get really, watching Food Inc. and stuff like that, that's a great primer. And in my research, I'm finding more and more how scientific it really is, the effects. Because I'm even seeing that it really breaks down your own genome to where you become, in essence, it kind of sounds crazy, but a genetically modified person over time after eating these.
Yeah, it's no surprise to me, but there are some dissenting voices, if you will, on the GMO debate, or just opposing views, really, not to make it sound eerie or mysterious. But I also interviewed a biology professor at a local college, and she felt more to the persuasion that GMOs, it should be examined more objectively, because it seems that the business aspect of GMOs and Monsanto and GMOs themselves, the scientific process, is a completely two separate debates, and they're often intertwined in public discourse. So I think it is essential to kind of establish the difference between Monsanto's corrupt business practices and incompetence, and also the biological process by which this happens.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons out there to not trust Monsanto. And of course, Monsanto is the largest shareholder of all of these. They're GMO because they're genetically modified to resist Roundup, a Monsanto product. So,
and Agent Orange, of course.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, get into some of the history of Monsanto. I know that they were sued, and you know what? I want to put this out there because, again, I don't like to sound all negative all the time, but they can be beaten, and they have been beaten before. They were sued in the 70s for labeling Roundup biodegradable, and it wasn't. And they were sued and lost, and were forced to put that on their on the Roundup container. But so get into some of the other shadier aspects of Monsanto.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with their history, but I do know a couple of things. First of all, Monsanto is, or was rather, the producer of Agent Orange in the Vietnam War. And when I went to the March Against Monsanto this past year, the first annual one, there was actually a speaker there whose father suffered severely from Agent Orange, and when he ended up having her as a child, the various negative effects actually were transferred to her, and she had an amputated leg because of it. So it's one thing to be an armchair activist, see the pictures on Facebook, do some of the research, read some articles, but it's a completely different thing when you see it take on this human aspect, this very human aspect, where somebody is physically impaired because of corrupt business practices and complete greed. Now, also Monsanto was involved in the production or passing rather of aspartame. Now, I might get this a little incorrect because I made this video a long time ago when I researched it, but essentially GD Searle was a pharmaceutical company back in the days, and a scientist within that company produced aspartame. And he wanted to get it passed to the FDA. And for those who don't know, aspartame is pretty much NutraSweet, any of those artificial sugars that you see at a restaurant, those pink, yellow, blue colored packets of artificial sweetener. So this scientist at GD Searle fed aspartame to rats. It gave the rats cancer. And then to send it to the FDA, before he did that, he pretty much tainted the results by excising these tumors from the rats as if the FDA wouldn't notice that. The FDA saw it, said, this is pretty corrupt, something's wrong here. They then hired an independent board of scientists to study that. They concluded the same results, and then during that time, Donald Rumsfeld from the Reagan administration was appointed, or Donald Rumsfeld appointed another person to the Supreme Court, I believe it was, or the FDA rather, to approve aspartame to be passed onto the market, and then that individual, that cabinet member at the FDA who passed aspartame, or approved it rather, was then fled to a law firm that represented Monsanto. So completely fishy business, absolutely crazy, and aspartame has been proven to cause headaches, all types of varying illnesses, etc. So, and aspartame's still on the market today in various sweeteners like Crystal Light and different types of food products. So absolutely insane.
Yeah, and I've seen it linked to Bell's palsy too, as well as a bunch of other things. We got about 2 minutes left. Oh, and I wanted to follow up with what you were saying about the human element of things. Is another thing is that these plants are all sprayed by Roundup, which is designed to kill every single plant, except for the ones that are genetically modified to resist it. And then you can also see in these other countries where farms get surrounded, the farms that don't sell out, people have to walk through these crops that are sprayed with it, and they basically have what looks like white phosphorus burns all over it from having repeatedly walking through these crops and everything. But like I said, I've got about 2 minutes left. I want to give you the floor. Tell us about this documentary. Where can people see it, and where can people see your work, and anything you want to close up with?
Yeah, of course. So the documentary, like you said, it's titled We the People, Genetically Modified, with a question mark, of course, because I want the viewer to make their own conclusions, but it can be viewable at youtube.com/teentake, TEENTAKE, and I was also actually recently interviewed on the Alex Jones InfoWars Nightly News, so it will be airing there soon, and it will be on Alex Jones' channel, which is pretty neat stuff, and the contest was sponsored by C-SPAN, and the winners will be announced this coming Wednesday, March 5th. So hopefully if things look upwards, I could have a possible position in that. That would be really neat. And other than that, I'll be making videos in the future, and I'm also working on varying projects, so keep an eye out.
Awesome. That's Andrew Demeter, everybody. Make sure you check him out. He's got a lot of stuff up there on Teen Take. And really impressed with you, man. And remember, when this kid is 16 years old, you don't sound like it. You're very well presented, very well researched.
You're way more accomplished than Mike Heise, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
God
Thanks
bless
for joining
you, my
us.
man.